to 132 Problems and our very first live stream. I'm hoping that everything goes smoothly. This is so exciting. I have a whole team of awesome people here helping me, and I have no idea how. I don't know who's there on your end, but I am really excited to get to talk to you and to get to answer your questions. So I have to first of all say, I want to thank everyone who joined in and shared last week's video, last week's episode. It has really gone crazy, and I've been so pleased with the interactions from it. It's been really good to see how many people have been resonating with that video. So thank you so much. And in the meantime, this is really exciting. So I said in our morning episode that this is supposed to be our 5th Sunday live stream, but since it's Easter, we are trying it today. So we all have been on high alert trying to get ready for it. I'm really excited. Call in if you're not able to get through. I've been told don't leave a message, just keep trying to call back because no one will be able to listen to the messages. So we're just going to go ahead and go right at it. Oh, yep, and here's our phone call. One call. I was going to say 1-800-JOE One Wife, but it's just Joe One Wife. 563-663-9433, and I would love to talk to you. So call Joe One Wife. So we have one question here in the chat already that came. And so this is Stephen Nix, my good friend Stephen. He said, many critics of the LDS Church will say that the church hides uncomfortable information. They might point to the contrary First Vision accounts being locked up, revisionist histories, and unreleased William Clayton documents. Why do you think the LDS Church was willing to release the Joseph Smith papers? It surely has done more damage to their narrative than anything else. Oh, that's a really interesting question. I'm just so glad that they released the Joseph Smith papers because I think, I'm got a little too much nerves going on, so I won't get every name right. So someone can put in the name in the chat, the right name. But was it Hubie Brown that said, if we have the truth, it can't be damaged. And if we have not the truth, then it ought to be damaged. And I just really think that's true. I think the more information we have, the better we can know if we have truth, and the more solid our testimonies can be, and the more solid our foundations can be. So I actually think it does the opposite of hurting the church. I think it helps the church. I think the more trustworthy the church is, the more their narrative is backed up by solid evidence and solid information. I think the better things are all around. Because first of all, it's always better to have truth. It's always better to be founded in the truth. That's where God really is. And I think that these so many people leaving the church and having their testimonies challenged because they were built on a sandy foundation has been more destructive to the church than anything else. So I personally am really glad that we have the Joseph Smith papers, and I hope it continues with more and more transparency. And so are we ready for a call? Oh, I thought I saw a call coming in. So let's see. Oh, I have another question that came in. Many people believe that the polygamy deniers are being deceived. What are your thoughts? Well, of course, I think exactly the opposite. I think that the polygamy deniers are the ones who are willing to really look at the evidence. It is so easy to believe a narrative we've always heard. And it's really hard to go against the mainstream. It's really hard to be called silly or crazy or stupid or sidelined or a conspiracy theorist. And so I just think that if we look at the evidence, that's how we find out what the truth is. That's the best that we can do, is really investigate firsthand sources, look at our sources, look at what our opinions are based on. So I think that I will tell you this is the trajectory that I see. The more people dive in to the actual sources and the actual evidence, that stream seems to take people one direction. I have yet to see someone who thought Joseph wasn't a polygamist, who got into the actual sources and changed their mind and decided that he was. Maybe that's happened to some people, and I'd be very interested to talk to them and find out what sources they found to be sort of that compelling that they changed their mind. But for me and for everyone I have engaged with, it has been exactly the opposite. So I really think that if we want truth, we should look at the sources and try to find out what they tell us. And that's how we can know that we're not deceived. So I think that most people refuse to look at the sources because they're either nervous of what they will find out or nervous of what the implications may be. And I think that that's a mistake. God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. We can handle the truth. So let's see. I think we have another question. What do you think will happen with the new biography about Joseph Smith that President Nelson has announced? The one that Brother Turley was commissioned to do. Oh, that's a really good question. I'm kind of on pins and needles to see what happens with that. From what I know to this point, I'm a little bit concerned, not terribly optimistic, just based on the people. Some of the people that I know are working on it and some of their narrative. Really, really hope. I guess I'll just put this call out to any of the historians working on that. I really hope that you will engage not only, well, I hope you'll engage directly with some of the people that are on our side of this debate, right? Because we really have pushed forward the knowledge base beyond where it used to be. Just believing the kind of old narrative of Joseph's polygamy is based on old information. It really is out of date. And so I am I'm just putting my hope in and my plug in that I hope that they will engage. I don't care if they engage with me or with somebody else, but I hope that they will engage with our information. I would love to see a really good someone on the polygamy denial side of the aisle who is really good at the sources. I would love to see someone like that actually hired to contribute to that book, because I think that that would be a great way to make sure that all of the bases are covered. I can tell you this, if they don't do something like that, this is not going to be a very useful book. If it just tells the same, I mean, we already have saints, we already have the gospel topics essays, we already have the other biographies, Rough Stone Rolling and the others. We don't need more of this same narrative. It will be a huge waste of time and money if it just rehashes the same narrative with maybe a few changes here and there. It needs to be a really rigorously done book that is looked at from all angles. And if they are willing to do that, I think it will be profoundly important and impactful. So I can't make a prediction, but I can sure say what I hope will be the outcome. So let's see. Here's another question. What do your bishop and stake president think of your podcast? Ooh, that's a really good question as well. So my bishop, we had a new bishop put in last year, and he is a great guy, a really nice guy, like my old bishop, who I don't think is terribly interested in the topic, which is just fine with me. I have met with him. I asked to meet with him just to let him know what I was doing, so he wouldn't be taken off guard if there were any more emails or letters coming in. And so I'm certainly not going to say that I have his 2 thumbs up seal of approval, but I did explain what I'm doing. And he said that he would talk to the stake president about it, but didn't express a lot of concern other than, well, I'm going to talk to the stake president, see what he says. And many of you know that I absolutely love my stake president. I think he is an incredibly good, sincere, just a good, humble man. And he, I'm guessing that my podcast makes him a little bit uncomfortable. And I hate that. I hate making these guys' job any harder than it has to be. And, but at the same time, I really believe that he knows who I am and that he knows my spirit and trusts that. And he has given me counsel periodically here and there. And really, he's part, I don't want to do anything that would, I guess, betray the trust that I feel like he has put in me as far as not asking me to stop or taking any steps along those lines. And so far so good, because I have really good leaders, and I think that there are people who are very committed to the truthfulness of the gospel and want various perspectives to be heard, various faithful perspectives, especially. So anyway, so far so good with that. And I'm really thankful. And so let's see, I have another chat. So I guess, have we not gotten a call yet? We're okay. Call in. We'll get some calls coming. So let's see. Where would you suggest starting to look at for firsthand sources? It feels overwhelming. Okay. I totally understand that feeling. Anyone who's watched this podcast from the beginning, as you've all been instructed to do repeatedly, you understand that I felt completely overwhelmed by the history. Well, first of all, when I started digging into this probably 15 years ago, I felt completely overwhelmed by the topic in general, because even just going to the scriptures felt like a ton to try to take on. And so digging into that side of it felt huge. And that's why I was so thankful to be able to engage with the best polygamy defenders, right? Like actual FLDS people and FLDS scholars. That really helped me to know what the arguments were, as well as just reading the scriptures for myself. So once I felt like it's been years since I felt like I had a pretty thorough understanding. It's of course grown as I've continued to engage during doing this podcast. But it took me a full, I don't know, like a year till I dared to feel like I could handle the historical mess. It just felt like this huge, overwhelming, how do I possibly get into that? I don't know what to do with any of it. And so that was, I very much understand. So I think that the resources that are there now, Whitney Horning's book, the Price's books are huge as well. And I know they're written from an RLDS perspective, well, the traditional, the Restoration Branches perspective. So it's not exactly what we believe, but those are really good places to start. And then the podcasts that are coming out, there are a lot of people doing this. And then I do think it's just useful. Here's where I guess I would suggest starting. When you hear me talk about something or someone else talk about something and there's a link, click on the link and go start getting your feet wet into the Joseph Smith papers. And that's a really useful way to get started. And so I think you can start there and then just see where you go from there. It feels overwhelming until you get in and all of a sudden you're swimming and you know how to swim and you're just figuring it out. So that's what my suggestion would be. So, okay, it looks like we have a phone call from Benjamin. So Benjamin, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Hi, thanks for calling.
Yeah, thanks for doing your YouTube channel.
Oh, yes.
We have, okay, so I went on my mission in the late 90s and we were still taking a bunch of flack from the discrimination that happened against Black members of the church.
Yes.
And during that time, the Brigham Young manual came out, and like if you'd grown up in the church, you knew this was like a highly sanitized version.
Yes.
Of what Brigham Young had preached.
The Teachings of the Presidents of the Church series. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And one thing that I've noticed recently is I was reading through the Wentworth letter, and that last paragraph before the Articles of Faith, where it talks about the standard of truth has been erected, and it talks about no unhallowed hand is going to stop the church from
the truth from
fulfilling its ultimate right.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at the different things he rattles off, right? He talks about calumny or whatever it is.
Calumnies
that's
may
kind of
rage.
like spreading.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right. And then mobs may combine and armies might assemble.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, that's all effects of polygamy, right? I mean, so I'm wondering if it's a hypothesis, right? I'm wondering if that unhallowed hand they're talking about in the Wentworth letter is, Joseph Smith had some kind of clue that the church might go off course after his death. Like maybe Brigham Young and or John Taylor is that unhallowed hand. It's just a hypothesis. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, first, I just want to thank EJS who just sent in a super chat. I really appreciate that. And then, Benjamin, I will tell you this, that it was actually in the middle of one of my podcasts that I was doing when I found myself saying that. When I found myself saying no unhallowed hand can stop the truth from progressing in direct regard to Brigham Young. So that is definitely how I have come to interpret that, because I think that is, I hadn't put together the piece that you brought, that maybe Joseph Smith was knowingly predicting that. I just felt like he was prophesying that either intentionally or unintentionally. And I love here. I looked it up so we can read the whole thing. No unhallowed hand can stop the work from progressing. Persecutions may rage, mobs may combine, armies may assemble, calumny may defame, but the truth of God will go forward nobly, boldly. I'm trying to remember it. Boldly, nobly, and independent till it hath penetrated every continent, and it goes on from there. And yes, I share your hypothesis, and I actually love it, because I love it. I think it really can be unsettling to people, right? To learn that maybe Brigham Young did some things that were, shall we say, unhallowed. and I
Yeah.
oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, I think for me, I find it incredibly comforting to know that God knew that the whole time. Go ahead.
Yes, and it says something kind of strange, which is that, goes back to why is it not the Church of Heavenly Father of Latter-day Saints, or the Church of the Holy Ghost of Latter-day Saints, or the Church of Joseph Smith of Latter-day Saints, right? It sort of implies that, like, Jesus Christ is kind of running the show, regardless of how far off course any individual prophet goes.
I completely agree with that.
So,
in fact, go ahead. Sorry.
It's just so weird. It's just strange. It's a very strange thing to me, is all. But I find it's very faith promoting also, though.
Yeah, I was just finishing reading this, and it goes on to say, until it has penetrated every continent, visited every clime, swept every country, and sounded in every ear. And then this is the part that just got my attention: till the purposes of God shall be accomplished, and the great Jehovah shall say the work is done. And so it's not really about the church, right? It's about the purposes of God. And I think that's really cool. Like, that's one way, because sometimes people will be hard on, well, probably all of us, definitely on me, saying, like, how can you stay in the church? You're so hypocritical. I get that both from active believing members of the church who disagree with me on polygamy, and I get it from people who agree with me on polygamy but who have left the church, right? But that's, to me, this is what it comes down to. God's in charge. I really, really believe that God is in charge, and God could have made this all happen differently, right? And God allowed it to happen this way. And I think it's because the purposes of God are for each of us to learn to discern truth, regardless of what's happening. And,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and he's insistent that we all use our agency,
yes.
right?
Yes,
so that applies to the leaders of the church too. They have to use their agency also, and there's consequences for that also.
Absolutely, yep. And I believe the invitation is always there for all of us to repent. So that's what I think it comes down to. So,
okay.
Oh, go ahead. Is that all?
Well, just thanks. I just wanted to get your 2 cents on that as well.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I think that was a great question, and I love that we share that insight in common. I love always getting a second witness. So, thanks for the call, Benjamin.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. It looks like we now have Carolyn. Okay, so we're just about ready. All right, Carolyn, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Thank you for calling.
The first thing, you're welcome. I thank you for doing this. The first thing I wanted to say is that last episode, I thought you knocked it out of the park. It was so good.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Should I tell you all a funny story before we get to your question? That's funny now.
Yes.
I that week that I was trying to get that episode ready, just so everyone will know, I, among other things, everything that possibly could happen that week happened, including my car broke. I've got 6 kids. I'm trying to run everywhere, and I didn't have a car. And then one day when I was working so hard, my computer broke. I actually dropped my computer, and my computer broke. And then about 4 other things, and I also ended up getting sick. And so I just kept praying, like, Lord, I'm just hoping that this is all the adversity, because this episode really matters and is really important. So I have to say, I'm really thankful that was a really hard week, and I got it done. And as soon as I finished, it felt like this burden lifted off my shoulders, and I was like, okay, let's hope this is a good one. So thank you for letting me know that it was worthwhile.
Yes, it was. Let's see, I'll give some background to my question. I guess I've been sitting on the edge of my seat, watching, drinking in every thing that was uttered over the pulpit and in Sunday school, ever since I can remember, my youngest years. And just has caused quite a bit of reconstructing, deconstructing and reconstructing, especially and with COVID. And so we have spent 42 years in Texas.
Okay.
Away from Utah, and we just barely moved up here, and we had to wait for our house to sell. There were some snags when my husband was transferred from Salt Lake to Ogden. In that, we have experienced so much Christ-like expressions and help, and beyond what I know that we would have ever gotten away from the saints.
Oh, okay.
There's so much. I feel like there is so much light, and so I really appreciated the last comments about but it's disturbing that I didn't realize that there could be unhallowed hands in the church. That threw me for a loop. So my question is, with all these cases of the horrific cases that come out of branches of the Restoration,
the FLDS, is that what you're talking about?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, and Daybell and the murders and so forth. It seems like there's so many people coming out of the woodwork from every side saying that this is a cult. And I think it seems like all the culty things came from the unhallowed hands.
Yes, I agree.
And so I just it's really interesting to try to sort it all out. And so one big question I see a lot of people in the chat having is, where does the endowment come from? What are you?
Have you watched my episodes? I did.
Coming out.
Have you watched my episodes?
Yes,
I did on the temple.
did.
Okay. So yeah. So what is your question?
Yes. Okay. My biggest question is how to help, because I see the light, and so how can we help those around us that are going away or calling people away? That how can we? I don't know. They stop the hemorrhaging.
Oh.
What's the best way to, what I'm saying?
Like how can we
help people know it's not a cult? I mean, or say, yes, there's culty things in the church, and we, let's say don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes. I think this is such a good question. And so I always have to preface it by saying I do honor people's journey. And if, people feel like they need to leave the church, I'm not going to say they can't, or that they must not. But I agree with you. I think that's
so true.
I feel very much that I want people to stay in the church. I think the church is better with its members, and I think the world is better with the church, And so for me, one thing I try to do is to remember a couple of different things. The church doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? The church is what we make of it. And I think that also helps it not be culty, right? Like I have a hard time with people who call the church a cult at this point. I think that that's just not very well informed. Or
I do too. I don't like it at all.
Right. And so I think one thing that I try to do is to be in the church, to exist in the church, and yet say what I believe. And I hope that demonstrates to people the possibility to do both, right? That it doesn't have to be one or the other. If the church serves people well and their families well, I think us demonstrating the willingness and ability to have the courage to maybe occasionally, when led by the Spirit, speak up in Relief Society or priesthood meeting or gospel doctrine and make a comment that maybe expands people's perception a little bit, right? And be willing to
right.
And I think it's powerful to let people see us being ourselves in the church. And that's the best thing I know to do, and being joyful in the church, right? I know I've taken a lot of flack over the years for my willingness to, I hope not criticize, but to point out concerns I have about various things in the church. But I'm really glad I've done it, because I've seen so much division on both sides, just like you're talking about. I think that there's this, I think that people who are so adamantly in the church that they just can't allow room for people to have different opinions or perspectives, they're, I believe, partially responsible for people who leave, because they really give us the impression there's no room for you here, right? And so I want to speak to those people and say, please make room. Please make room. Please don't call for my excommunication or other people. Like, do you really want anyone who doesn't completely agree with you to leave the church? Is that what you want? Please make room, and just continue to discourse, continue to talk. If I'm wrong, then let's talk about it, and let the Spirit and your evidence, or convince me. And then on the other side, to people who feel like they have to leave, I guess I want to encourage people to be patient with those decisions, right? It's so easy to learn a bunch of things and feel like there are all of these problems and it's not true and I have to leave. And I think that those decisions made in times of turmoil aren't often the very best decisions. And so I'm all for people stepping back as they need to, but I really do. That's what I encourage people, is like, do the church your way. Let it serve you. The church is for the people, not the people for the church, right? We do all serve and we contribute, and that's wonderful. But it should be something that brings us all joy. So that's about the best. And then as I've studied all of this, my testimony of the Book of Mormon, and like the last question, the power of God's hand in everything that has happened, my testimony of all of those things has grown profoundly. My testimony of Brigham Young has not grown, but my testimony of God has, and actually my testimony of the restoration has, and my testimony in the goodness of the church has. So that's what I hope that we can all do, is be in the church and speak what we know to be true, and be who we are, and be as loving and Christ-like and excited about life and the gospel as we can be. Because I'll tell you, a big part of the reason that I stayed in the church through some really difficult times was because of amazing people in the church who helped me stay. So I hope that we can be those people for others. So thank you for calling and for your phone call. I think we have some other people waiting.
There is a lot of okay. I was just going to say that's so true, that we need to remember to make room in the church, and that going through this journey has made me closer to God, and helped me realize that each person is needed, and to stand on their own 2 feet.
Yes, I love that. And that's something we can keep telling people too, is that this journey isn't to be feared, because it does increase I believe it increases our understanding of God and our love of God and our faith in God. So thank you so much, Carolyn. And I appreciate the call.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, goodbye. And I think next we have Mark on the phone. And so, okay, Mark, hi. Thanks for calling.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Hey, I just want to thank you for all the research you've done. It's been so valuable to us, especially your research and your 4 episodes on the temple. And after seeing the source material and all that you've gone into, it's left me with no belief at all that there's any efficacy in what goes on in the temple. And, for a couple of years, as recently as 6 months ago, I had gone to the temple weekly because of the promises of blessings. I never really felt a lot. I just want to get your impressions with all the research you've done. Do you believe there's efficacy in the temple ordinances? Because for me, they've just turned to nothing.
Oh, that's such a good question. And I first want to just say, I'm sorry, like that's a painful, it is challenging to have our perspectives change so much. So I will tell you, I have wondered about and struggled with and prayed about the temple ordinances for many years, maybe going on about at least 17 years. And I, like you, have had periods of my time where I went weekly for many, many years at a time. And I will say this. So I always kind of wondered, I learned quite early on in my journey that the way I described it was that temple ordinances aren't a thing themselves. I kind of called them like what is the wording that I used? My brain's drawing a blank, but I I guess I'll just have to come up with new words. I thought that they were sort of a physical foreshadowing of actual spiritual events that could happen. For example, baptism isn't actually, the ordinance isn't actually where the power is. The ordinance is pointing us toward the baptism of fire that we can experience. And coming through the veil into the presence of God isn't actually happening in the temple, but it's pointing us toward that process that I believe the gospel is all about, which is coming into the presence of God and being sealed in the temple as I was a 20-year-old. I don't think that's actually where we are sealed by the Holy Spirit of promise, but I believe it points us to actual spiritual events that can occur. Does that make sense? So for a long,
it makes total sense.
Okay, so for a long time,
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I asked you a question. So for a long time, I looked at it through that lens and tried to learn everything I could, sort of like, okay, if this is a symbolic roadmap, what things can I learn that can help me along this journey? And so in that sense, I still think that the temple has the same power that I thought it had before I did that research into the temple, to point us toward the things that God has promised to bless us with as we follow along this path. And I also have found, so I found power in the temple in those ways, and truth and efficacy in the temple. I also, and I'm sure you can relate to this, I've had times in my life when I have found immense spiritual power in the temple, insight, blessings, peace, comfort, and in difficult times. I'm still struggling with 2020, the temple. Them taking the temple away is something that I still have not made peace with, I guess I can say. But in general, I have had so many times where I loved going to the temple for additional spiritual power or answers or peace, whatever it may be. And I personally believe that God honors the faith of people, as I said in those temple episodes, right? I think my faith in that sacred space that is held sacred by so many people and my attending there is answered by the Lord, right? So I still do believe that the temple, if we look to it still in that way, it can still answer our faith. It can still answer that end of its purpose. And so as I said, I still have not come. I stopped attending the temple as often as I used to. About the time they made the new series of Adam and Eve movies, they made like 3 of them at the same time, and that didn't sit right with me. And I was trying to figure this all out for myself. So I haven't attended as frequently for the last several years, but I've still gone. And then since the shutdowns, I've only gone back. Honestly, I've only gone back once, and that's not necessarily intentional. It's, I'm open to going when I feel led to, but I haven't yet. But I am really happy that I have friends that are still going. So I guess I'm saying all of this to just say, I personally do think that there is use in the temple. And I think it's a personal, individual journey. One of the things I kind of came to is to let my relationship with the temple be moderated with God, instead of letting my relationship with God be moderated by the temple, as I think we're kind of taught to do. Does that make sense when I say that? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. I think one thing I've learned in this journey is that we tend to apply spiritual experiences to things we've been taught bring spiritual experiences, when really it's our seeking God. And so we can be seeking God and we happen to be in the temple.
Yes.
Whereas if we've been in the woods or taken a walk and had that same fortitude of seeking, we would have had the same experience. And so I think it's easy to, I don't want to say be manipulated, but almost to fool yourself into thinking these things come because of this, when in essence, they come because we're seeking the Lord.
Yes, I think that faith and desire is the power, not the building. I agree with that.
Yeah. And I guess just when you go back to the original endowment and you look at how it evolved with polygamy and, wife putting another wife's hand in her husband's hand, I just the whole source of it. And it was so powerful in your episodes of all these immaculate and amazing buildings that were built. And then when you go watch Mountain of the Lord, it's like it was the greatest religious edifice of all time. they spent 40 years to put this together when in essence, it had little value to them. They built so much and did so much. And so as you just see the full picture unfold, the importance of it to the early saints becomes pretty clear that it really wasn't that important. And it was just based on such an unworthy beginning of polygamy. And as you've gone through the Nauvoo, and the temple wasn't completed, and Joseph really didn't restore all that he meant to restore because the temple was never completed. Anyway, I don't want to belabor it. It leaves me very suspect that any of it really came from God.
Oh yeah. Okay. I understand. This is how I kind of look at it. Like that first caller where we talked about God knew this was all going to happen. This is, I'll show you share my perspective. God knew this was all going to happen. And when I was having profound experiences in the temple, it wasn't the truth about the history of it wasn't any different than it is now. It's just me knowing, right? And I do want to say I have a slightly different perspective, and maybe it's since I've recorded that episode, but I do think that I don't think that Brigham Young prioritized the temple, but I tend to think that maybe it's because it was such a mess. The foundation was such a mess that he just washed his hands of it. They didn't know what to do because they did have the endowment house and the St. George Temple. Anyway, so it's hard to know exactly what the mindset was there. But I guess for people, this is, I guess, where I am with it. I don't think that not going to the temple injures my relationship with God if I feel God is telling me not to go to if I don't feel inspired by God to go to the temple. But I also feel like if I do feel inspired to go to the temple, then spiritual experiences can await me there, right? You're exactly right. Joseph was in a grove of trees when God appeared to Joseph, right? And I know that my husband and I both have had heavenly manifestations and seen visitors in the temple. So I guess I would encourage people to do what they feel inspired to do is the best I've got. But thank you so much for the phone call. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Oh, I thought we had another one waiting. Is that okay? Let me see if we have any chats coming in. I have people sharing chats with me. So let's see. So this question is from, let's see, I'm trying to find the one I have, and I might have to come back to one if I missed it. So here's a question that says, Joseph Smith was a candidate for president other than the warning to Stephen Douglas. Is there anything written in credible sources in American history about Joseph's candidacy? And I have to say, I am not an expert on that topic at all. So I would have to look and see. I'm trying to remember, I've read quite a bit of the Warsaw Signal and the Sangamo Journal. And I know they talk about Hiram's Senate race. And I believe that those do say things about Joseph running for president. If I'm recalling, someone can put in the chats if I'm wrong, because I haven't read them recently enough. And that wasn't the question I was asking. But if I recall correctly, I do think that there were things about his presidency. So I didn't know that was up for, I didn't know that it was at all what's controversial that Joseph ran for president. So that's not something that I've known to look into. I would be curious if Alan, who asked this question, is still in the chat, if he has a follow-up to help me understand a little bit more. But okay, let's go to Leon's question. Did you address in any of your episodes a letter written by Maria Jane Woodward? She claims that Emma told her that she realized polygamy was from God and she was just jealous and needed to repent. Okay, so I have to say, one of the things I'm nervous about is there are so many names and so many documents that I've looked through that I don't have them all at an instant recall. I can definitely think of a letter that I'm thinking that this is probably about, but I'm not sure if it's Maria Jane Woodward. And so let's see. I'm getting a message, but I'm not sure what I'm being told. So, is there a follow-up? Yeah. Okay, thank you. The letter is used by Brother Halverson on his podcast to show that Emma was trying to come to terms with polygamy. Okay, yeah. Ugh, sorry. So first of all, if I were going to be investigating this, which I'm sure I will do now, and I think I have read this in the past, if I recall, this letter was written much later. again, right? It was written many decades later. And if I'm recalling, I think it was the husband that was involved and told his wife about it, right? Is it the husband that said he saw Joseph washing his hands after helping one of his wives deliver a baby? Maybe I'm getting the details right. Maybe I'm getting them wrong. But I do know that this letter was much later. And this is what I think. I think that Brother Halverson is great. I think that he, like so many others, starts with a desired narrative and then tries to find sources to fit into that narrative. And so I don't think that this letter would actually be that important if it didn't tell the story that he wanted told. To me, it goes along with the claim that Emma inviting Louis Bideman's, her husband's mistress into her home and raising the child showed that she had finally come to grips with polygamy. And that is something I adamantly object to. So I don't like how they use these sources to try to paint the version of Emma that they want painted. And yet they're really dishonest about not including, say, William Clayton's journal. Like, he doesn't talk about the claim of William Clayton that Emma was out of control, screaming at Joseph in a carriage riding through town, and he had to treat her roughly, which to me sounds, I envision that as a slap across the face, right? So if we're going to be using these sources to tell this narrative, we need to tell the true narrative. And he needs to tell what that Brigham actually claimed, that Emma tried to murder Joseph multiple times, trying to poison him twice. And that they taught that she pushed Eliza down the stairs, right? And that she was the most wicked woman in the world and a fiend of hell. And so that's what bothers me about this approach to the sources. I think that they are used. I sometimes get accused of cherry picking, which I just have to throw up my hands and laugh. I think it's ridiculous because I think that's exactly what both of the other sides do, both the anti-Mormons and the Mormons, trying to find a better way to craft this narrative. The entire idea that that Emma failed her Abrahamic test of allowing her husband to sleep with all of the 16-year-olds in town, right? Like, no. So I'm sorry that he found that letter and used it that way. I've actually invited Jared Halverson on the show multiple times. I understand. I think he's a BYU professor employed by BYU. So I understand why he doesn't feel at liberty to come on or doesn't feel the desire to come on, but I would love to talk to him about these sources because I strongly object to the narrative and the way the sources are used. I don't think it's very honest. So am I taking another chat or did we have a phone call? Okay, let me go. Okay. So, so let's see. Are you going to be diving into temple sealings and their history and how the polygamy sealings were done and how it compares for current practice? Oh, that's a really interesting question. I guess I hadn't thought about that specifically. So I do have my research into temples was so vast that I ended up with, I think it's at least 5 future episodes that are on my list somewhere when I dive back into that. So I'm sure I will get back into sealings at some point. So, okay, it looks like we have Terry on the phone. Hello, Terry.
Hello.
Hi, do you want to...
Thank you so much. Sorry.
Nope, I was just going to tell you if you have the computer or something else on to turn that down. So, yep, go ahead.
Oh, I totally did. Okay. Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for doing this. I just couldn't sit here and listen to all of this and not call you up and just say to you, thank you. And this has just made such a huge difference in my life. I just had to go through the biggest repentance process. I grew up in a family where my dad basically hated Joseph Smith and thought he was going to burn in hell next to Hitler because of polygamy.
Oh,
and
wow.
I sat through a lot of kind of brainwashing type sessions and I don't know, my emotions about this topic have been so it's like I had to shove them to the side for so long because they just were too much, and I just didn't understand how this all fit into God's plan. And once I listened to your first podcast, I'm sorry, I don't mean to get emotional, but once I listened to your first podcast that it was actually the one with Jeremy Hoop, and
I just had this moment of thinking, oh my gosh, like, this is so much different than what I thought. And I just, before I even continued finishing listening to it, I just got on my knees and prayed to the Lord, like, is this even an option? And he just answered me just immediately and with such strength and love. And I don't understand how people in the world are so brave like you. But I just want you to know that it's just been really important to me. And anyhow, now that I've told you all of that, I just wanted to ask the question, how big of a, I just feel like all of my friends that are leaving the church, like they have all of these little fringe things that bother them, but just polygamy is just this huge divider. And I just wanted to know your thoughts on that. Like, do you think that it's going to be one of the things that is just this massive dividing line? I mean, we have to repent for how we've talked about Joseph Smith, God's servant. You know, we as a people, I really feel, I mean, I went through a week-long repentance process, just bawling my eyes out and feeling so terrible for how I have felt about Joseph Smith my whole life. And still believing that he was a prophet somehow, but, you know, but just needing to repent deeply for how I felt about him. And how much of a dividing line do you think this is going to be for the church?
Well, that's a good question. So I want to respond to a couple of things and then I'll come back to that question. I think for me, I totally relate to the repentance necessary. I think that when people haven't experienced that yet, they might be confused by us talking about repentance just for not understanding something correctly. But I know exactly what you're talking about. And actually, the thing I felt like I needed to repent of was that I thought that of God. That I thought that God would be the author of this, right? That's where I relate completely to just like the desperate need to repent for having that perception. And then, yes, and then I do very much relate to also having that be on Joseph. I will say, see, that's one thing when you say that your dad was so anti-Joseph, I actually like that your dad was able to say this was wrong. This is wrong. And so since it was wrong, I'm not just going to say God did it. Right. I think that's actually a better step than, oh yeah, God, you know, the women can suffer, but if that's what God says, I think that's a terrible perspective. So anyway, so I really think that, and I guess your question about polygamy being the dividing line, I just see so many divisive things in the church. You know, I see so many big issues. I will say, I think that polygamy is the big Joseph Smith issue. I know there are a lot of other things like horses in the Book of Mormon and DNA evidence for the Lamanites and, you know, the geographical questions, and then the Book of Abraham. There are lots of questions that people have about the church, but I really think polygamy is the big guns, right? So I do think in terms of wanting to have something against Joseph Smith, that's really what it comes down to. But I think as far as the church being divided, I can just see, well, this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Do you care if I go on a little sidetrack with your question?
No, please. Are you kidding me?
Okay, good. So this is something that's really been on my mind lately. Like Joseph translated the Book of Mormon. I believe he started in, well, he married Emma, I think in 1827. I believe he translated the Book of Mormon in 1830. Someone can tell me if I'm wrong on that. But in 1830, as far as I'm aware, there was no polygamy happening. I don't think he had any polygamy going on in his life, or, you know, he was a newlywed with his wife and there were no polygamists in the church. And I don't think he'd even been exposed to that idea. And yet he included polygamy in the Book of Mormon. Isn't that interesting? And this is something I find really fascinating. I guess I'll tell you the couple of thought processes that go together, because when you ask about dividing issues in the church, I think that the LGBT issues are another huge dividing issue in the church. That's really tough. I think that in 2015, when they did that really unfortunate policy, I just saw the floodgates open. And that's when it felt like to me, just the massive exodus from the church, people who just were like, absolutely not, this is not acceptable. And so and so as I've thought about it, I've been like, so if you're very familiar with like the Mormon and LGBT discussions, which I am, since I have been interested in that topic ever since the Lord, I felt like, started teaching me about it, and then later on learning I have gay children. People are really quick to point out that the Book of Mormon doesn't say anything about homosexuality explicitly, which I find fascinating. And so it's made me think with what a huge issue LGBT issues are in the church today. And it really is just this huge challenge, particularly to be same-sex attracted, to be gay, whatever word people are comfortable with. We just don't have good answers for that at this point at all, right? Like, what do we tell our children or people that are in that circumstance and want to be in the church? Like, we don't have good answers. And so I've been like, why is there nothing in the Book of Mormon about it? And I happen to believe that there is information in the Book of Mormon about that. But what I have found to be so interesting is, I guess what's really been weighing on my mind is the immense hypocrisy of us as a church being so adamant to call out homosexuality as abomination and to come after that so harshly as we have done for the last, several decades, while the one abomination the Book of Mormon calls out explicitly, repeatedly, and the most adamantly, that one we embraced and we keep in our back pockets. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's incredible to me. I'm like, that's massively hypocritical of us to be like, no, polygamy, that's okay. God commands it, but this is not okay, right? I'm like, wow. So I guess what I see happening is just flat out abomination is the dividing line in the church, right? Like, I just think that anything, I think that all of these issues, I think that we as the church, the church, because we weren't the ones that were alive and doing it, but the church has made itself very vulnerable to, like our stance on traditional marriage isn't bulletproof because of polygamy. Right? Because we still embrace polygamy. So it's interesting to read, for example, the Proclamation on the Family, keeping polygamy in mind, and how the church has done that when they talk about how important it is to have God's established order of marriage and family in society to prevent the destructions at the last days. Anyway, so I see that as a really interesting thing. I do think polygamy is the number one thing that leads people to come to believe that Joseph Smith was not who I happen to believe Joseph Smith was, that he was a bad guy rather than a good guy. And I believe it's the number one issue that leads most people out of the church. Pretty much everyone I know who leaves the church, polygamy is in there somewhere, if not the main issue. And so, I think that I think we're in for interesting times. And all I know is that, like, take the Lord as our guide and hold on tight, right? Like, get ready for the ride.
And ask. I mean, for heaven's sake, just talk to God about it, because he will answer you. It's amazing.
I love that.
Thank you.
Yes, I love that you brought that back up, because I think that is exactly true. God, and you are testifying of that. God is desperate to give us this information, right? God is so quick to answer this sincere question. If, like I said in the last episode, if we're willing to ask the right question. If we're willing to even just ask, God, is polygamy is polygamy righteous or wicked? So thank you for coming on to tell people, please ask that question. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Let's see. Are we going back to chats for a minute? Okay. So let's see what I have. I have a question that says, I'm trying to figure out if tithing is what Jesus wants us to do. I don't feel good about paying any money to the church anymore. Oh, this is a hard one, because this is something I haven't talked about yet on my channel. I understand this. It's a really hard one. I don't know how much I feel inspired to say on this topic at this time. I do think it's important to listen to the Lord's guidance on this. And I think it's something that many of us can relate to. And I will say, I interviewed Rock Waterman a few weeks ago. He's great. He has a fantastic blog. And so I think he's done some work on this that I think is worth reading and considering. I know that the church's history with tithing is very complicated and confusing. And I do believe that, a lot of things tend to kind of ossify and solidify into a practice that we have now that we think it's always been this way and it must always be this way. But when we look at, again, into the historical sources, that just isn't the case. I know that when the 10% was begun, the leaders told us they didn't want to do it. And they said it would only be for a very short time until they got past this challenge the financial challenge they had at the time. And so, so I think that just like we were talking about with the temple, tithing very much needs to be an individual choice with individual guidance. I will say that I believe that we have kind of come up with stories about tithing. If you pay your tithing, then you'll always have what you need. My testimony of that principle, of that understanding of that principle has changed. And I really believe that if I understand that everything is the Lord's and the Lord has entrusted to me and my family our stewardship, and if we seek to do what the Lord wants us to do, that anything that happens to us will be for our good, right? And so we may have difficult financial times. We might have good financial times, but I know that God is not a financial investment vehicle. I don't any longer think like, oh, pay your tithing because otherwise you might have financial problems. I think that that's kind of another tradition that gets us to pay our tithing, but maybe we're not even paying it for the right reason because we're paying it for financial blessings, right? So I think I'll have to see when I feel free to talk openly and freely about tithing and my perspective on tithing. But I can just say that I think it's a very valid question. And so, there's another question about tithing. I guess a couple of those are coming in right now. So let me get to this question. Why is the church only excommunicating those going along with their narrative? I'm not sure I understand that question. Why is the church only excommunicating those going along with their narrative? Because I don't think the church does tend to excommunicate people who go along with their narrative. So we'll try to get back to that question and see if it got written down wrong. And then let's see. Are you planning an episode on Bishop Snow? Ooh, I just finished Whitney Horning's book and was appalled at what happened, and Brigham supported Snow's actions. So maybe we should just go ahead and talk about that a little bit right now, right? Bishop Snow. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head if he was I used to think he was in Cedar City. I mean, in St. George, but as I've read it more recently, he was either in Provo or maybe Cedar City. If someone remembers, they can remind me. But yeah, Bishop Snow, that is an awful story. Fits right in with the gruesome things that were happening in early Mormondom. So I don't know. Maybe I'll just talk about it now. I haven't done the research, so I probably won't do it justice. But from my recollection, from when I have studied this, Bishop Snow had his eye on a young girl he wanted to marry, who had there was already a couple established, right? This young man and this young woman were fond of each other. I guess from the stories we get, the young man was a little bit wild, maybe not fully righteous. I have my questions about if that's true or if that is kind of the lost boys tendency happening. Oh, he's not righteous enough because I happen to want to marry that young woman. So I think that's worth investigating. And he warned the young man to get out of town. The young man didn't. And so this is the bloody castration. From what I understand, Bishop Snow got a little posse together, chased the young man out into the woods where they castrated him. And the next day at church, Bishop Snow gave a terrible sermon to the audience and showed them what happened when they disobeyed counsel and proceeded to nail that young man's what they had removed from him to the wall as a very visceral reminder to the people of what happened if you disobeyed counsel. And it goes on from there. So I know I haven't done it justice. So yes, it is something that I need to talk about further. I haven't dug in enough that I feel confident that I fully understand all of the implications and what might be credible, what might be less credible. I do think the story itself is credible from what I understand. And the horrible part, the whole thing is the horrible part, right? But it goes on from there to where Brigham Young was informed about what Bishop Snow was doing. And let me just say, Bishop Snow did this. This isn't the only thing he did, right? a bishop who would do this would be a nightmare in a million ways. And I think we do have more information about Bishop Snow. But when it was reported to Brigham Young, if I'm recalling correctly, I believe the quote was, "I feel to sustain him," which meant not only I leave him in his calling, but, it sounds like I sustain his actions. And so this is an important story. I think, I'm hesitant to have it be blown out of proportion, to have it be like there were castrations happening all over Utah and people, like I don't want it to be too. How can that story possibly be overstated? Like I'm having this internal argument in my mind. Wasn't happening everywhere all the time, right? But it did happen, and it was allowed to happen, and that tells us a lot about the culture, about what was happening in Utah. I'm really excited. I'll announce now. I have an upcoming interview scheduled with Cheryl and Dan Clute, who were on my podcast a while ago. They are a wonderful couple from the restoration branches who have been involved in research for many, many decades. I will say, not just many years, but for decades. And I have an interview scheduled with them where they are going to talk to me about many of the stories of bloody Utah and, bloody Brigham, bloody Utah, what happened, and people having to escape for their lives. And some were successful and some were not. So I'll just say this: theocracy is not a good thing. I'm glad we are not living in theocracy. I think that early Utah is one of the times that the rest of the nation had to save the saints from themselves, right? Because there is just this dark spirit of polygamy. And that's what I get concerned about. And you'll hear me talking about this a bit in the future in some episodes that are coming up, but it seems to follow this same pattern. And we see it in our day. Someone just called talking about the Daybells, and we have the LeBarons and the Laffertys and the early church leaders, and story after story where there is this dark spirit that comes in, I believe, to destroy the restoration, to taint it and take it sideways and sideline it. And it seems to go polygamy, and then, unrighteous dominion is a big, huge part of it. And it's polygamy, and it always seems to descend into bloodiness. Blood atonement seems to follow on its heels. I shouldn't say always. I don't think that always happens. I don't think all polygamists get bloody. So forgive me for misspeaking there. It has a tendency all too often to descend to this next level, to this next step. And I think it's very concerning. And that's part of why we need to be speaking about these issues, because that spirit that comes in is the same spirit. And so, yeah, I think that's a really good question that we went on. So let's see if I have another chat to answer. I'm going to have to look through and find where we are. Okay. This is a good question. Michelle, do you think same-sex unions will exist in the celestial kingdom? Okay, I've spoken about this to some extent, and this again is just such a radioactive topic, and it's so funny because you just take it from all sides. I get accused of everything. So the last thing I want to do is hurt anybody and make people who have had hard paths. It's hard to experience homosexuality in the church. That's a hard path. The last thing I want to do is make that harder for anyone, is to add any pain onto people who have already experienced pain in this area. So, so anything I say, I don't want it to be experienced that way. I believe to my core in the sanctity of marriage as God established it. I just believe that, and studying polygamy has increased my testimony of that. So that is my belief. However, I will say I was given powerful answers about, for me, about homosexuality many years ago, long before I knew I had gay children. And I still believe what the Lord taught me then. It's been interesting because even as I've had gay children, my views haven't changed. And what I believe, and I should do a full episode on it at some point, but I guess I've just kind of avoided it because it's a hard issue. What I believe is that marriage as established by God is between one man and one woman. And I believe that our gay children and our gay brothers and sisters are God's perfect creations, who God intentionally sent to earth for us in our day to help us learn more charity. I believe there were people who said, "Here am I, send me." And so I believe that my job in this life is to love my fellow man to the very best of my ability. And I'm uncomfortable with questions about condoning. And, I understand them, but at the same time, I just don't think that that's what it's about, because we cannot understand another person's experience if we haven't had it and if we don't share it. And so I just believe so strongly in, as I have tried my best to navigate this path imperfectly, and it's always a challenge. And I do my best, and I have come to understand how desperately I need the Lord's constant guidance in these issues, so that I can say the correct things, right? And so when I see when I see people calling me an LGBT advocate, as if that, I just recently was called like LGBT activist, feminist, blah, 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 as if that's like this huge insult. And no, I'm absolutely not an activist. But what I am is, I hope, an advocate for love, for all of us being our best selves. And I believe that there will be people of all different experiences and all different perceptions in Zion together, because I believe Zion is a place where we don't contend. And I don't think not contending means that we're all the same, right? And I do think that we tend to put homosexuality in this elevated status of sin, where that we can judge. Like even President Uchtdorf told us, don't judge people because they sin differently than you do, right? So even if we think that homosexuality is a sin, I've made this comparison before. I believe that, there are many things that are sins, that are weaknesses. If we want to, I have no good words. I hate using the word sin. I hate using the word weakness. We all have different characteristics, right? And so I guarantee you that when I was busy with all of my children, homeschooling, trying, if someone who kept, I've used this example before, so if I'm boring you, forgive me, I'll go to the call in just a minute. But if someone came into my house and they believed that cleanliness was next to godliness and their house was immaculate, right? And they saw my messy home, they would absolutely think I was lacking, right? And their judgment of me would do nothing to help me or to serve me or to bless me, right? Believe me, I had to struggle with that all my own. So I guess I feel the same way. Like, God cannot look upon sin with the least degree of allowance, right? That means that people use that against gay people as if that applies to them instead of it applying to all of us. That means none of us are getting into heaven. So I guess if, like, am I going to be in heaven if I still struggle to keep my house clean, right? Like all of these, like we all fall short. We all miss the mark. We all need the atonement of Jesus Christ. And I am so thankful to know that the Spirit is there and the Lord is there to guide people along their path. And my job is to love people. And so that's what I want to do. And that's why I don't tend to speak to this issue very often, because I don't want my testimony of marriages got established to get in my way of being able to love people who are the people who need my love the most. So that's the best I can do with that right now. We'll go ahead and take the next phone call. So, John, hello. Thank you for calling.
Oh, hello. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Yes, I'm glad you got through.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple things real quick. First of all, thank you so much for the work that you've been doing on this topic and taking it head on. And it's been such a fascinating journey to follow you on this topic of polygamy. And I'm a member of the church. I am actually in the process of coming back to the church. I have been out for a long time. I sort of turned my back on it when I was about 18, 19, right before I was supposed to go on my mission. I had to tell my dad I wasn't going, and that was really tough. But I never had any ill feelings towards the church. It wasn't like a defiant move. It was just more of a, I wanted to experience the world outside of the church and lost my faith and everything. And so I'm in the process of coming back. And finding your podcast has been very helpful in reconciling some of the history that I think too many members ignore. It's a part of our history, and I think it's something we need to talk about. And I just wanted perhaps to get a little advice from you on one thing. I'm currently in a relationship with a beautiful young woman who is not a member of the church, but she's very receptive to my beliefs and is interested in what I believe. But the topic of polygamy did come up, and she, she's very concerned about that aspect of the history, and my father was a faithful member his whole life and taught me a lot about our history and some of the, not so proud moments of the LDS history. And so I was aware of Joseph Smith's polygamy, or at least, what, his take on it was. So we started having a conversation, but I felt compelled just to ask you how you would talk to a non-member in your life who is very important to you, how you would broach the topic of polygamy and how to acclimate someone to our history.
Okay, so let me get a little bit more clarity. So she understands the history of polygamy in the church, but she's concerned, is her concern that if you're in the church that you might be okay with polygamy, or is she just
so that was one of the issues, which of course I'm not a polygamist. I'm not I'm not an advocate for polygamy. It's something that we don't practice, and I'm proud that we don't. She's concerned that because this is part of my identity and I'm proud of my religion now, and coming back, she's concerned that perhaps some of the church history might discount the entire validity of the religion, if that makes sense.
so she's wondering how you can be in this religion with this past.
Yeah.
Is that part of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a really interesting question. I do think in terms of concerns about the church being polygamist, it's pretty easy to explain that, no, the church actually excommunicates polygamists. Yes, we do have a bit of a schizophrenic relationship with polygamy, but for the past, 100 plus years, polygamists have all been excommunicated from the church. And President Hinckley has I guess as officially as it can be, because it was on TV, has condemned and disavowed polygamy and said it's not doctrinal. So I think that we are in perfectly good standing to agree with the president of the church on that issue. And I guess for me, that's an interesting, does your, is she your girlfriend? Does she have a religious affiliation?
So she doesn't currently go to church, but she was raised Catholic.
Okay.
With its own history,
Right.
I don't want to do a tit for tat, but
right. I don't.
The Crusades are a thing.
Yeah, I don't think it's about tit for tat. I think it's about recognizing human nature and God's interaction with humankind, right? Because there is not a single group or organization or institution or country that has been around very long that doesn't have its awful stains, like America. Do we all need to disavow America and leave America because of, there's current stuff going on that's concerning, but that's worldwide. But does the extremely problematic history of America mean that we need to all say, oh, it's bad, right? Or can we look at it and go, this aspirational brilliance of the founding principles of America are profound and incredible, and our goal is to continue to live up to them. And that's how I feel about the restoration. What Joseph Smith brought forward in the Book of Mormon, and in the true understanding of the nature of God and of God's desire and willingness to commune with God's children, right? Our ability to experience God in these really profound ways is so exquisite and aspirational and profound that even if, like we talked about in that first call, I'm going to keep referring to that, even if some unhallowed hands tried to stop the work from progressing, they're not able to stop the work of God from progressing, because each of us is here and has our own discernment and our own moral agency to choose to follow God rather than false traditions, right? So I don't know if that's helpful to your girlfriend, but that's what I like to focus on, is like looking at the Book of Mormon and the incredible insights in the Book of Mormon, and looking at the incredible sacrifices that did go in to the foundation of the church, and the beautiful revelations and the understandings we have that are so easy to take for granted, right? And so I guess I just think the good massively outweighs the bad, and there's nothing without the bad. Like even all of us in our families, right? None of us have perfect parents. So what we try to do is recognize the things that were not perfect, that were less than fortunate, and try to do better in our own lives, and be really thankful for the things that were so positive that maybe we'll get wrong because we just take them for granted and not recognize them. I think that it's the same story with our church. That, at least that's my approach to it. I don't know if that's helpful. Is that what you were asking?
Well, it is helpful. I think that one thing that has also been helpful, and she's very busy. She's she just took the bar exam, so keep her in your prayers that she passes and
Yay,
becomes
that's
a lawyer.
great. My son's just about to graduate from law school, so we'll trade prayers.
Yes, for sure.
Congratulations,
But yeah, I think that she is open to coming to church with me too, which I think would help in just showing that you go to church and we talk about the gospel of Jesus Christ, and that's where the focus should be for us. And so I hope that we can move forward on what the faith is and what role it plays in our life today. And I also think that your podcast too, I've encouraged her to listen to you, and because I think also it's very important for women to be involved in this conversation too. It's very difficult for sometimes I feel as a man to talk about polygamy in a purely sort of historical academic sense, and not able to empathize in the same way with the brave sisters who had to practice this. And so I'm very grateful to you and the work you do, and I hope that she'll take me up on listening to your podcast, because I think you've done a really great job at putting a very human face on this issue, which we desperately need in the church. So
thank you so
that's
much.
all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate
thank you.
that. And good luck on your continued courtship and on your journey back to the church. It's kind of so refreshing to hear people coming back instead of going the other direction. So thank you. I appreciate the call, John. So should I take another? Yep. Thank you. So, okay, I have a question from, Rick Hansen. So Rick, we had talked about him coming on the podcast, so I'll be curious to see if he does. I'm not welcome on his podcast because he will not brook polygamy deniers, but we actually are friends and have a good relationship. And I've told him that he's welcome to come on my podcast just the same. But let's see, I'm sure he has a great question here because he is a smart guy. Let's see, what are your thoughts on the antiquity and authenticity of the Book of Abraham, including the controversial doctrines of plurality of gods and priesthood restrictions in the Book of Abraham? So this, I hate to have to sort of I'm not punting, but just I have not dug into the Book of Abraham adequately to feel like I have sort of the well-grounding understanding of it that I have done of, for example, polygamy. So I'm always a little bit hesitant. I will say that in my own life, in my own studies, I've had experiences with the Book of Abraham, just like with the Book of Moses. I've had some profound insights. I've also had some things that seem a little strange, right? And I think it is interesting to know about the papyri and the funerary texts and all of those questions. And yes, I guess what I would say is I am aware of the issues. I'm aware of the problems, but I haven't become familiar with them to the point that I would feel confident expressing a very well-informed perspective. For me, it's not something that I'm, it sounds wrong to put things on the shelf, because I don't believe in putting things on the shelf. It's something that I'm willing to be a little bit patient about until I have the time and the focus to dig into it to the extent that I feel I would need to. And as I have gone through all of these other issues, because, just so everyone knows, I have gone on my faith journey. I have been at the point of thinking that, do I need to just throw it all out because it's all fake? And, like when I got down to my bare bones of what do I absolutely know it to be true, and I got down to pretty much God is good. God exists and God is good. I got down to about there. That was the one thing I knew, because I'd experienced God too much to doubt that. And then I've been rebuilding from there. And for me, the more I've studied and delved into things, the more it has built my gratitude for the restoration and built my faith. And I do have I love the Book of Mormon, right? And I love the scriptures. And I most of all love the ideas of the Spirit of God being alive in all of our lives. And that's what I've experienced. And I do love the idea of eternal families and the way that I understand it. And knowing that Joseph had a revelation on eternal marriage is that is not this. That's part of it was included in 132, but it's not 132. So I apologize. I will have to wait to speak more helpfully on my opinions on the Book of Abraham until I have delved into them more. I guess at this point, it's not that I'm keeping it on the shelf. It's just that I can only do so much at one time, right? Isn't that true for all of us? And so I cannot say for certain one way or the other. I have had also periods in my life where I kind of went with the not fully fallen prophet model, but maybe the David Whitmer model, where Joseph was supposed to translate the Book of Mormon, but that was all he was supposed to do, and he started messing things up from there. I've really I guess I've kind of had all of these models for different periods and tried to find truth where I could. And so this is one that I haven't fully answered for myself. Any of those things could be the case. It could be, I don't want to offend anyone. Just, I guess what I'm saying is I don't know the answers yet. And I'm willing to follow where the evidence leads me and where the Spirit leads me. If Joseph was totally mistaken about what these scrolls were and shouldn't have bought them and created an embarrassment for himself, maybe that's what the story is. I've heard some people say, and to me, I tend some people have said that they don't believe that Joseph was actually had any involvement in the Book of Abraham. I'm with that argument lands for me right now about how the idea that Joseph was never a polygamist used to land for me. Like, I guess I think of it in the same way as like, I wonder if that's really based in strong evidence or just in kind of like some evidence and really wanting it to be true, right? And that's kind of what I used to think about polygamy deniers before I became one, before I converted. So I'm, that might be the case. It may be that we're actually wrong about the history and there's something else that Joseph was looking at or had, or, the idea that it was just a, what is it? I can't think of the term. Some of you who are more familiar with it will, but the scrolls he had were just a conduit to be able to receive revelation. So anyway, Rick, you're smarter than I am on that topic. I apologize. I can't answer it yet. So, okay, let's go to our next question. It says, why don't we just follow the Book of Mormon since it contains the fullness of the gospel, especially the message of Jesus when he ended the old law and gave us the new? Oh, and so I'm guessing that this person has some specific ideas of what they consider to be the fullness of the Book of Mormon that we would follow. And I think that everyone is free to do that. I think it's interesting that, I won't remember off the top of my head. I'll have to look it up. Someone can tell me where in the Book of Mormon it says it contains much of the gospel, much of my gospel is what it says. And I think that's really interesting where it says in one place it contains much of my gospel, and then it also contains the fullness of the gospel, right? So there are some interesting things there. And I do think that each of us following the Book of Mormon, different things would stand out at us, different things would be prioritized, right? So I understand the need for there to be a structure and that there's always going to be disagreement in that. that's one thing. I just think it's very easy to criticize something, and it's very difficult to build something and to maintain something. It's much easier to tear things apart than it is to build and maintain them. And so I don't know what it would look like with everybody independently following the Book of Mormon without any kind of a structure. We are supposed to gather together and meet together, right? And so we all, like, something grows out of that, and I don't know what it looks like. So that's the best I can do, is to say, I hope that we actually each are doing that. I hope we are following the Book of Mormon to the best of our ability. And I happen to personally believe I can follow the Book of Mormon and be in the church and join in the church. I feel like it makes my journey more effective and better. I like gathering and being inspired by other people's insights in the Book of Mormon. I know we don't always do that perfectly in our lessons, but sometimes we do it so great. And so that's the best answer I have for that. So should I keep going on with questions? Okay. So let's see. This next one is, how can the Brighamite LDS faction lay claim to any higher degree of legitimacy than any of the other splinter groups that formed after Joseph's murder? I think that is a fantastic question. I have to say, as soon as I started engaging with people from other, should we call them Mormon denominations? They don't call themselves Mormons, but I think John Hayacek, the first time, he's great. And I had him on the show, and I hope he'll come on the show again. The first time I talked to him, and I kind of realized I don't know anything about Jacob String and the Stringites. And then, I mean, of course, knew something about the RLDS Church, the Community of Christ, but collaborating with people in the restoration branches and in the RLD, I mean, the Community of Christ, I don't know that they hold on to that promise of the one true church, the one with which I am well pleased, verse like the other branches do. But I do think that that's a really interesting question. And I tend to think you're right. Like, the way I look at it now is that God scattered seeds, right? Seeds of the restoration, and that everybody has their part, and it comes back together. Like we bring them, we're in the process of bringing them all back together now, which I think is beautiful. I have loved engaging with people in these different branches of the restoration, and I have thought it's fascinating to see how everyone clings to that scripture. Also, every single FLDS breakoff also grabs, like, now we're the one true one. I'm the new prophet and the only, right? I'm the one and only. And so I think it's an interesting dynamic that we all tend to do. And I, for myself at this point, am interpreting that scripture to just be like, when we are being led by God, then we are the true and living church, right? I don't know. At this point, I haven't made complete peace with the one and only idea. That doesn't resonate with me well, and I don't know exactly what God meant by it, or what Joseph Smith meant by it. So I kind of set that aside for myself right now as I try to figure it out and just see God's fingerprint everywhere in every branch of the restoration. So, it looks like we have we have a super chat. Let's see. Did that come in? Let me scroll down. Oh, yes. Thank you. Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much. And I have seen, I'll call him Photo Chikyo, I think. And I have seen your comments. And thank you so much for your input into this podcast and your many great comments. He says, this is for your website. And this time, I think Joseph Smith did practice polygamy. And I appreciate at this time, I think Joseph Smith did practice polygamy. And I appreciate research. Thank you so much for that donation. I appreciate it so much. And if I ever am not quick to say thank you, please know that I do appreciate everyone who donates and contributes to this. And keep going, keep studying, and we'll see where you go from there. So, okay, it looks like we do have Anne on the phone. Hello, Anne.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Michelle. This is Anne.
Yes, thank you for calling.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I sure can. Yep.
I wanted to tell you a little quick story of what happened to me. I have always, I was born in the church. I'm polygamous ancestors. I'm the 6 of 7 girls who all believed that polygamy was just holy and wonderful. And so did my parents. I'm 73 years old. And from the time I was 14 years old, I could not stand it. I had fights with my family over it. And I believed Joseph Smith was a prophet with all my heart. And I could not understand how he could know God and not know that polygamy was evil. I could not grapple with it. One time I read section 132 and was hysterical enough that I had to have a priesthood blessing. And I went ahead and read it again after the blessing. I was in my bedroom reading it, crying and calling out to God. Are you this way that this 132 talks about? How could Joseph Smith have said it? I had never thought that he didn't write it. And so a knock came at my door. And I went to answer the door, and my son said, "Here, Mom, somebody handed this to me." And it was a pamphlet, and with big, bold yellow letters, it said, "There will be no polygamy in the celestial kingdom." It came to my door at the time I was reading and crying. This was years ago, and I put it on the shelf since then. I had another time when I was wanting to know the answer, and I went online, and I was looking at all the YouTube channels, and your face came up, and the Spirit said, "Here's your answer, Ann." I said, "What? After 60 years of praying to know the answer, now I've got it?" "Yep. Here's your answer, Ann." It was your face. And I just want to know, if you're ever somewhere, I'm going to come and give you a big hug, because you kept my testimony strong of Joseph Smith. And to find out that he did not write 132, I've read all those scriptures. I've gone and studied all your podcasts. I know with all my heart that Joseph Smith revealed the restoration of the gospel, and that Satan had to get his way in to try to destroy the church with polygamy.
And I cannot thank you enough for calling to tell me that. Those are incredible.
I just wanted you to know that happened to me. 60 years of praying. 60 years. I pray and pray and pray. And then the Lord said, "Here's your answer." I'm like, "What? After 60 years, you've got my answer?" "Yep, listen to her." "Okay."
Oh my goodness.
Can you believe?
No, that is
was so strong. It
incredible.
was like, "Ann, here is your answer."
That is amazing. Thank you so much. And I have to say, I'm always amazed when I hear people who had so much more discernment than I had. You, as a 14-year-old, saw the truth of this and knew that it was not okay, that this is not who God was. And so I think I just want to thank you for seeking for 60 years and staying in the church and staying in the patience. As I was just talking with the Book of Abraham, a willingness to be patient until the answers come, with a confidence knowing the answers will come. Thank you for exemplifying that for all of us. That is a gorgeous story.
Thank you. If you're ever somewhere and I can give you a hug, I'm just dying to say thank you so much. And I know that what you've been teaching is true. I just know it with as much as I know God lives. God has finally answered my prayer after 60 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you.
Love you.
Oh, I love you too. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Okay. Pull myself together. That's, I just want you guys all to know, I know that sometimes, people accuse me of having like followers or fan, and I just want to say that is not true. I feel incredibly privileged that the Lord has given me this opportunity. I have spent years, decades of my mothering knowing there were things I was supposed to be doing, not knowing what it was, just knowing I was supposed to be using my voice and my talent and the way my brain works to do something for God. And I didn't know what it was. And I kept being told, have another baby. I would always pray, what do you want me to do, God? Because it was actually painful to know I was supposed to be doing something and to not be doing it. And the Lord just kept telling me, not yet, not yet. And I kept having the answer to have another baby, And until finally, like I feel like the elastic band was pulled so tight for so many years, waiting to know what it was I was supposed to be doing, that now that I've been given that opportunity. I'm sorry, I get a little tearful because it came at a high price, right? Like it's been some challenges to enable me to be able to do this. But I know that the Lord has given me this opportunity, but I know that people who are resonating with this message, it's not about me. It's about the Lord. It's about the Lord speaking to people's hearts. And I just get to be fortunate enough to be one of the voices engaged in that process. And so I I want to thank you, Anne, and thank you for everybody else who is willing to hear this message from God, even though I happen to be the one saying it right now, right? That's so anyway, so everyone who wants to think I have followers, no, I don't. I just get to say some things that the Lord has taught me and given me the opportunity to say, and people who are resonating them are following God, because I'm not leading anybody anywhere. So thank you, Anne, for praying for 60 years and for sharing that story with us. So, okay, I have a chat from Gary Arnell, who, Gary, I've recently talked to him about coming on the podcast. I love his story and I love his spirit, and the way that he engages he's always a good example to me. So he said, I know you've done 2 episodes already on the Nauvoo Expositor. Thank you. Have I only done 2? I thought I've done 3 so far. I think I've done 3. So I'll check. Someone can let us know. Maybe you know better than I do. Could you summarize your take on why it contains language so similar to Doctrine and Covenants 132? Okay, great question. And yes, and I'm so excited to do part 4. It was I thought it was part 4. Is it? Yeah, I think so. If I'm wrong, I'll correct it later. But I was so excited to do part 4 of on the Expositor, when I was also wanting to do the temple episodes, and a lot of people were like, do the temple. So I set the Expositor aside, and I have so much more information that I'm just dying to get out there. And so I'll tell you really quickly. This is what I strongly believe after having searched through it a lot. And I think I did talk about this quite a bit in part number 3, maybe. You'll have to watch all 3 parts and see. And now that we have the transcript, you can just search it and see which part it's in. But or as soon as all of those transcripts are ready. But I think there is a lot of strong evidence that there were fake revelations going around. We know for a fact that, well, I know for a fact, not that everyone agrees on this, but I don't know that everyone's looked into all of the evidence sufficiently. The apostles and the elders, whoever they were going around claiming that Joseph had this revelation, right? Long before they claimed that 132 was even written down. They were claiming these revelations. Now, keep in mind, we do have all of that evidence in actual journals and letters, and more than that, in England, right? In England, when Heber C. Kimball and Brigham Young and William Clayton were in England, they've all left us tons of records, which should and would exist if Joseph had been involved, right? So we know that all of this predated even when they claimed that Joseph started it, or when Joseph taught any of them. And so they were going around making these claims, which is why Joseph and Hiram and Emma, particularly Joseph and Hiram, had to constantly, almost daily, say, we are not saying this. We are not doing this. We are not telling anybody to do this. And if anybody ever tells you to do this, call them a liar, kick them out. They're not of us. No matter if it's an apostle, a prophet, God, if an angel comes down and tells you this, they are lying to you. They are false. And that's how we have the evidence to know for a fact. And there's more to it than that, but we know that Joseph and Hiram were constantly fighting against this, and people were constantly claiming, no, Joseph and Hiram said this. We know that William Bennett was doing that, right? All of the women that came and testified, Catherine, I won't remember her name right now, but that testified about Chauncey Higby and Francis Higby, and that they were saying, Joseph said that I can do this. Joseph said this is what it is. They were all saying, Joseph said, right? And so I think it is not, so a couple of other things that people just fail to recognize. William Law himself, who is the one who created the Nauvoo Expositor, and he and his wife are 2 of the 2 who wrote the affidavits. He himself said the document he saw was only 3 pages long. I think he was lying about Hiram bringing him a document on polygamy. We do know, I think that the evidence is solid to show that Joseph Smith did receive a revelation on eternal marriage. And I've spoken about this before. He taught about it on July 16th, 1843, 4 days after he supposedly had the polygamy revelation or had it written down. And so the fact that he taught it then makes me think that it was around that time he could have received it. Because that's the first time I've seen him teaching about being married in view of eternity, and that he was reading about Luke chapter 20, I'm going to get it wrong, but about when the Sadducees were challenging him about if a woman had 7 husbands and somehow that got turned into polygamy. That's weird. Polygyny, where a man has to have 7 wives, right? So we have him teaching plural marriage. Not plural marriage. We have him teaching eternal marriage that day. And then Hiram, we have him teaching eternal marriage on April 8th, 1844 at the magical disappearing Hiram speech, where the JSP, the Joseph Smith Papers, now has only the edited version, not the Thomas Bullock version of notes. And then we have in the June 8th and 10th City Council minutes, we have Joseph and Hiram both, again, affirming exactly what they taught in both of those circumstances. It goes together perfectly. So there was, I believe, this revelation. James Whitehead, who was Joseph's scribe, who did not come west with the saints, but who testified in the Temple Lot trial, said that the revelation that he saw in winter quarters, he saw the true revelation on eternal marriage, he said it was 3 pages long, about 3 pages long. And we also know that William Law claimed that whatever revelation he saw that he claimed to see was 3 pages long. So I think it's possible. Jeremy and Hoop and I have talked about this quite a bit and back and forth ideas. I think it's possible that Hiram was maybe showing this revelation on eternal marriage. And so maybe that's how his name got mixed up with it, because everyone was claiming that he was showing them the revelation. I don't know. I'm just trying to come up with possibilities at this point. What I do strongly believe is that I feel like I can say, I know there is strong enough evidence to say that at this point, it should be factual that there was this true revelation from Joseph Smith on eternal marriage. And then I happen to think there were some fraudulent revelations that people said they existed. So, people were saying they existed. So I think it's possible that they did exist. And if you look at section 132, and if you look at the Nauvoo Expositor, first of all, things from the Nauvoo Expositor, and this is part of what I'll get into in part 4, the affidavits, the claim that Hiram read it to the city council, which I'm sorry, should be laughable for everybody, that that's such a bad claim. And yet it's universally accepted. So we'll go into that a little bit more. And the supposed similarities between these affidavits and section 132. I think a couple of things that are really important to recognize that we'll get into are the motives that Austin Kells had, that the laws had, and also what's even more important than what is written is what is not written, what they failed to say. So that's all very very telling, very informative, and very important to get into. And so the similarities, I'll hurry and finish this. I just have so much to say, and I'm sad that I haven't done this episode yet. But the similarities are really particular. Nothing from the affidavits applies to anything that comes from the true revelation. Any of those verses that are actually about eternal marriage, that are all universally monogamous, right? We can go through and point out what is likely true and what is false. And anything they say only aligns with the false parts. So it's like, yeah, there were fake polygamy revelations going around. So what? And they got conglomerated into 132. Exactly. That's exactly what we believe happened. It makes perfect sense, right? And so that story works out perfectly and explains all of this evidence far better than any other explanation does at the time. So I'll get into those details a little more. It's also good to recognize that the claims that are made in the Nauvoo Expositor are actually like whatever revelation they may or may not have seen or that was going around, is everything was changed and flipped on its head, right? And so the parallels are, I think, less interesting than the differences. And I'm excited to get into that more. So thanks for that great question, Gary. And then, okay, we have Andrew on the phone. Hello, Andrew. Thank you for calling.
Oh, hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
It's funny. It's a little bit off. It's a little bit off. I'm watching the YouTube and it's a few seconds behind, so I was kind of surprised to hear you like that. But yeah. Anyway, first off, congrats on all the subscribers so quickly. I've watched the channel grow from 7,000 to almost 17,000, so that's awesome.
Thank you. Yes, if everyone hasn't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe because it really does help us be taken more seriously. So thank you.
Yeah, and I admire the passion. I've been a lifelong member myself. You know a lot more than I do. I haven't gotten through all your videos yet. And I'm just fascinated and impressed of what you've been able to find. I didn't even know about Section 101. But here's just one question. And what would it take for you, or what findings or series of findings would it take to say, wow, I think Joseph Smith really was a polygamist? Oh. I've asked the same thing the opposite way to I messaged, I didn't get back to, but Brian Hells, what would it take for Brian Hells to think that Joseph Smith wasn't a polygamist? I'm just kind of turning it around. What would it take for you to be like, hey, looks like the research is a little bit wrong. He was indeed a polygamist.
Oh, that's a great question. So I can answer it pretty easily. First of all, I always believed Joseph was a polygamist, right? That's my come from. That's what I believed
Right.
forever. And so it took evidence to shift my perspective, it took a lot of evidence and to shift my perspective. And then it took some profound spiritual experiences to make me speak out against it, out about it, because that was a hard step to take. I will say this. If there were a child, game over, right? We would know at the very least infidelity or full-blown polygamy, however you interpret it. So that would be done. If there were a letter from Joseph to one of his wives, that was not like we have the Whitney revelation, which is a known forgery. We have several things that claim to be something, and we've shown them all to be forgeries. So for me at this point, it's like everything that I thought existed has actually gone. I thought this was evidence of Joseph's polygamy, but it's become evidence of this conspiracy, right? I know they call us a conspiracy theorist, but it's a conspiracy either way. Either Joseph and everyone was lying, or Brigham and everyone was lying, right? It's the same thing either way. So at this point, I don't know what more information is out there, what more we could find. If there were a child, game over, done. Yes, Joseph was not faithful to Emma, right? And then any contemporaneous evidence that is not more effectively explained as a later fraudulent claim or a misrepresentation, the way that they misrepresent, for example, and explain away Jacob 2:30, so it would actually be pretty easy to show that Joseph was a polygamist if there were any actual evidence for it. I will say that what they actually use to base this on, like John Bennett's claims, that's not good evidence. The fact that the ceilings had to be redone in 1846. And I will say, someone asked earlier about ceilings. That's been an interesting journey because I've been looking for those ceiling records. I thought I had seen it, but I'd only seen the Nauvoo endowment records. And the actual original sealing records, I don't think those are available for us to see. The proxy sealings where they had to seal Joseph to his wives after his death. The founder of the dispensation head who restored all of the keys didn't have the keys to do his own sealings. He had to rely on proxy work. How does that make any sense at all, right? And I am going to be doing an episode coming forward on the wives and the sealings because it's fascinating to get into. So pretty much anything that were actual evidence would convince me. If the problem is there just isn't any. And the more I've looked into it, the more I've seen that there just isn't any. And so it'd be pretty easy to convince me if there were evidence. I will, at this point, it would be a little bit tougher just because I've seen so much fraud that I'd be like, okay, what is this really? Let's look and see. I'd be a little suspicious of it at this point, but if it showed to be valid evidence, this truly is Joseph Smith's DNA, this is Joseph Smith's child, I'd be like, okay, weird. Let's refigure that, So is that a good answer? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I admire your courage to go against mainstream scholarship, mainstream at this point anyhow, even in the church. And I really, really hope it'll be taken well. I think it should be taken well, but I also believe the church is, as an active member myself, I also believe the church is unjustly silenced members with dissenting opinions, even if they were right. So I hope that won't be the case in the future as you grow in fame and, not fame, but popularity, I guess, with extra subscribers. So,
well, I
wish you the best.
So too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the call. I appreciate it. So are we back at the chat? Okay, let's see. So where are we? Okay, I have a couple of questions about what are my thoughts on different church practices, I guess we could call them. Someone's asking about baptisms for the dead, and someone's asking about the word of wisdom. And so let's see, can I give some quick answers to those? I tend to be a long talker. I have a lot to say on every topic if you haven't noticed. So I've thought a lot about baptisms for the dead. I have my own personal questions, and I'm sometimes I have to let you know, like I just ask questions and think about them and study them out until I get answers. So when I tell you a question I'm thinking about. It doesn't mean I'm throwing something out or that I'm claiming it's wrong. I haven't yet solved that for myself, if that makes sense, or the Lord hasn't given me further insight into it. So baptism for the dead is sort of in that category because, I mean, it absolutely was taught by Joseph, no question about that. So, but it doesn't fully make sense to me at this point, depending on what baptism is, I guess, because it seems to me, as I'm thinking about it now, that baptism is sort of an ordinance for the flesh, right? It's not so much to fulfill my understanding right now as I think about it. Again, I need to keep saying that. I don't know if baptism is like a check that celestial box, or if it's a gift to us, an opportunity for us in this earth to help us connect more to the divine, right? That it's a physical ordinance that we do in our physical body, and so it seems like it should be something that is for us in this earth. And if we're not existing in this earth, do we need it? I guess is my question. And I know that Jesus was baptized to fulfill all righteousness, but I'm not convinced that, like, I'm wondering if there could be some idea that it's sort of kind of that Catholic or Protestant idea that any child that's unbaptized is in hell, or, so I need to study it out more. And people might be going crazy because they know way more about this than I do, or they have had more answers or better answers or different answers. So I'm just telling you where I'm in the journey. And I'm sure that anyone who thinks I'm completely wrong will let me know. So, so feel free to do so. But I do believe that I'm totally aware that there are things I don't yet understand about it. And I guess that's what I could say. There are things I don't yet understand about it. I haven't made sense of it for myself about how it fits in or why it would be necessary. And it also did introduce a lot of confusion into the church. They had to redo it because they weren't keeping records right. And everyone was, I can see the possibility that it grew out of that time because there was so much death. So many people had lost so many loved ones that and if they believed baptism was necessary for them after they had died, I can see different possibilities. Just like I said before with the Book of Abraham, I don't know yet. I haven't settled that one for myself. So I that's still in the to be dealt with category. I'll figure it out at some point, or the Lord will let me know what I need to know about it. So what are your thoughts on the word of wisdom? Oh, that's an interesting one. I happen to like section, oh my gosh, my brain just died. Is it section 86? 89. Thank you. I have an ex-bishop sitting here with me, an ex-bishop, a past bishop, a previous bishop sitting here with me who can tell me exactly what section it is. And I think that I like section 89. I love reading it. I like that it's given as a, why am I drawing a blank? It's basically like good advice, not a commandment, right? Whatever the word is, given by way of, yes, a principle with a promise. See, bishops are really useful. Thank you. But and so I like reading it. I think my perspective on it, this is how I've kind of thought about it in the past, and I haven't thought about it recently enough to know this is exactly how I think about it now. But that if we are God's instruments, if we are instruments in God's hands, then it's useful for God to keep us sharpened, right? To help us be as useful as possible for as effectively as possible for as long as possible. And if God is telling us, hey, this is how you can live your most healthful life that brings you, I think that physical health is also often connected with spiritual health. I think that eating things that aren't good for us can get us fuzzy both physically and spiritually, as well as emotionally. We're all, so our bodies are so connected to our spirits and to our minds. And so I tend to think that there is a lot of value in asking. I guess the main core that I love about it is the principle that God cares how we take care of ourselves, and that God is willing to reveal to us how to take care of ourselves. I know that I have received some answers about how I eat, and I've been empowered to make some really difficult changes several years ago in the way that I eat. I was massive sugar addict my entire life. I've always been massively into food storage, and I always made sure that I had plenty of sugar and plenty of chocolate chips, because if I couldn't have chocolate chip cookies, the world was ended anyway, and nothing else mattered. That's how addicted I've always been. So it's been a big change for me, but I can say it has affected me in every avenue of my life, physical and also spiritual. And so I do think that and I really have been led by the Lord in how I should eat, how I should approach food. I'm still working on how I should sleep. That's a struggle for me. I'm not a good sleeper, and I'm always struggling with that. But so I guess that's my opinion of it, is that we each have the opportunity to understand the principle taught to us in the word of wisdom is to trust God to direct us how to best take care of ourselves. And then, yes, of course, I know that it was never meant to be a commandment, right? So again, we get our false traditions, and in my opinion, are traditions that get handed down to us and get ossified and become regimented rules. And I think that that's somewhat unfortunate, especially knowing, we had past leaders of the church that that hurts people's testimonies. We've seen what were the missionary videos they made, and the missionary just was embarrassed himself by saying that Jesus drank grape juice, not wine, and turned the water into grape juice, not wine, right? We just get ourselves into weird problems when we make rules that don't need to be rules. But since I am an active believing member of the church, I keep the word of wisdom as it is currently defined. So that's my feeling on that. So did we have a call, or am I still doing? Okay, let's see. I keep seeing, I'm getting mixed signals from my, let's see. What episode has been the most fun? What episode has been the most spiritual? Oh, I don't know that I could remember all. What is it, 107 off the top of my head? I can tell some that have really stood out to me. The episode on Emma was life-changing for me. That was a profound one. I loved doing the episode on Emma. That is the episode where I learned that Joseph was not a polygamist. And I learned more things about Emma, and had some experiences. So I love that one. Let's see, what I've had so many that are so fun. So that's a great question. I'm going to have to think about it a little bit more, but I can tell you some that weren't the best, but maybe I'll save that. I have so many interviews that I wish I could go back and do over now that I know a lot more, and I have hopefully improved my interviewing style. I'm sure I'm still not perfect, and but in general, I have a lot of episodes that I'm like, oh, I like that one. I like that one. I like that one. And I've mostly gotten over the feminine problem of being able to see myself on camera without cringing. So that's good. Guys, do a podcast, do 100 2-hour episodes, and you'll get a little bit better about seeing yourself on camera. Okay, it looks like we have a phone call. And it's Andy. Is that right? Hello, Andy.
Hi, Michelle. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Go ahead. What can
Hello?
I talk to you about? Yep, I'm here.
Oh, so I had a comment, and that is that, when I was young, I always thought I was going to meet one woman and get married and get sealed in the temple, and everything was going to be wonderful. But here I am. I am sealed to 3 women.
Okay.
My first wife and I were divorced. My second wife died of cancer, and now I'm married again. And I always just took for granted that was not going to be a problem. That I guess I kind of believed the thread of that plural marriage was just an eternal thing. But my current wife and I have been doing a lot of studying together. She listens to your channel, and we've been doing a lot of studying together. And as I have actually pondered this, as I've actually taken the time to ponder it and to think about it and to dive into it and to pray about it, I have come to the conclusion that I do not believe that plural marriage is a thing. I just the common sense of it, just the heart of the matter. It just doesn't. It's not something I want. I don't want to be sealed to 3 women eternally. I don't want it, and yet here I am sealed to 3 women. It just doesn't ring true to me in my heart. As my wife and I are trying to establish Zion in our own home, Zion is one heart and one mind, not one heart and not 3 hearts and 3 minds. It's one man and one woman. It's always about oneness. And so I just have come. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't agree with everything you say.
Oh, how dare you?
And I don't agree with everything you say, especially about different topics. But on this topic, just coming from me as a man who's sealed to 3 women, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't smell right. It doesn't taste right. To me, I am trying to build Zion with one woman, one heart, and one mind forever. And I just don't feel that, and I reserve the right to be wrong, but I just don't feel that 3 women and 1 man is just right. And I don't think it's righteous. I don't think it's holiness. I don't want to believe in a God who's got multiple wives. That's my thought. That's what I wanted to share with you.
Thank you so much. That is profound coming from you, from your perspective. That takes immense humility and clarity to say, even though this is my situation, this is what I believe. And I think it's interesting because, like, on the other side of things, we're always just taught, just trust God, right? And I do think there's truth to that when it in the way that you're talking about it. And like, okay, I'm in this situation, and yet I have learned this truth. So I'm just going to trust God that it's going to work out somehow, just like women in your position do, right? Who have been married to multiple men. And so I really appreciate you sharing that and having just the clarity and humility to be willing both to come to that conclusion and to call and tell us that. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Andy.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye. So we'll go to now, Patricia. Have you ever considered that the daughters of Zion talked about in 2 Nephi 13 are the different branches of the restoration? Okay. Apparently, I'm going to be doing some reading in 2 Nephi 13 to I guess, are we talking about, is this Isaiah 4:1? Yeah, I think, isn't 2 Nephi 13:1 the same? I could look that up really quickly. So our different branches of the restoration. That's a really interesting thought. The 7 women that take hold of 1 man, as I'm assuming what that is talking about. I haven't thought about that at this point yet. That's interesting. I will think about it. I've generally connected it more with the 7 churches that are spoken of in Revelation, the Book of Revelation. So yeah, that'll be something that I will consider further. And you know what, if you have more insights on that, feel free to send those in. And so, it looks like we have another call before I take another chat. And it looks like we have Braden on. Is that right? I guess we're just taking 1 second to get it set up. So while we're getting that, I guess the phone's being a little funny. So let me keep going with another chat. Are we ready? Okay, Braden, hello. Braden, are you still there? Oh, it sounds like maybe we lost him. So, okay, I'll go ahead to this next chat. And we'll see if we can get him back. So let's see what this question is. To be sent greeting, not by commandment. Oh, somebody is sending me the word of wisdom. Thank you. I appreciate that. So here is a question. Oh, Michael Ellis, he and I have gone back and forth for many years. He was actually in my initial polygamy discussion group, clear back in 2016, I think is 2015, 2016. So he said, if polygyny, he likes to say polygyny, if polygyny is an abomination, who would God command the Hagar to live in an abomination? So I think we might have some typos as that came through to me. So let's see. I guess the question is, if polygyny, so just to get our terms straight, polygamy is the broad umbrella term, right? For anyone who isn't familiar with this, of multiple, like either men being married to multiple women or multiple women being married to one woman being married to multiple men. I think my brain is starting to go. We probably should start getting ready to wrap up. But I want to thank M. Sandberg for the super chat. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That means a lot. And so anyway, so we have polygamy, that's the broad umbrella term, right? Then we have polyamory, that's a woman with several husbands. And we have polygyny, and that's a man with several wives. So I think that Michael has asked this question before, and I think he's asking that because God told Hagar to go back, and so therefore polygamy must be of God. That's not at all an argument that I find to be compelling, because God often can give us counsel that's the best for us to do in our circumstances, right? And that's what I believe was most likely the situation with Hagar. That was the best option for her in the circumstances that she was in. And I think that with all of the massive evidence that there is of God's only commanding monogamy, I think that that's a pretty weak argument in to try to try to object to that. So anyway, I'm sure I could do better with that answer at another time when my brain isn't so fried and when I didn't just get thrown completely off course by some psycho out there, but who called in. But anyway, Michael, I'm sure we will continue to go back and forth on some of these issues. So, oh, we have Braden calling back. Okay. Hello, Braden.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for taking my call.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I wanted to just thank you for being brave enough to take on these topics. The waters are murky in polygamy.
Yes, they are.
And it seems to go on and on. I think part of your show has really allowed me to ask questions. In fact, I've asked questions of my family members who are closer to polygamy and to try to examine the fruits of the practice, and I haven't found any good ones at this point. A lot of heartache, sadness, weird things. You know, it goes from just the easy things to talk about to things that are really, really difficult. And I think what you're doing is bringing to light that an issue that we have imbalanced the importance of male and female, and we're hurting because of it. And we're more powerful as men and women together, equal partners, helpmeets, created, like you said, the way that God did put us together in the garden, and one man, one woman. That's where power is. Do you want to talk maybe just a little bit about that male-female balance?
Oh, you want some of my insights on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm sure I could do better. This is going to be our last call, so we're about ready to wrap up. So I have a lot of thoughts that if I know I'm going to hang up from this and go, oh, I didn't say that and I didn't say that. But I do think that there is this perfect union, right? That becomes one. And I think that I think that there is so much symbolism on every single level. I think even the temple, one thing, when I did go to the temples weekly, and I just found the symbolism for me at that point in the temples, so I'll share it in case it's useful to anyone. I just thought even the temple testifies of this union of male and female, because the external of the temple, I had, my thoughts at that time is the male that faces the world and keeps protects and keeps the inside sacred, with the power, the symbol of power pointing to heaven. That's a masculine symbol, right? And then the inside of the temple, the womb, where we go through the veil, where we do sort of metamorphose. I said that word wrong. We go through metamorphosis in our spiritual journey to be born again and to come back into the presence of God, just like we were born into this earth. I think that there is so much that testifies, just like I was talking about, was it on in this conversation? But I think it was in a different conversation, but the moon and the sun, right? That are exactly the same size in the sky, so that when there's a perfect eclipse, we can see just like, that's how we've learned about the sun, is because we can just see the very little edge of it when the moon is perfectly on top of it. And the moon that's on a monthly cycle that symbolizes the female, right? And the sun that's on a yearly cycle that symbolizes the male, and how they interact with one another. And just, I think all things testify of this perfect unity that works together in such a beautiful way. I think I was talking about the moon and the sun because someone left a message that said, like, duh, of course you're wrong. Like, this is all nonsense. There's one sun and 9 planets that orbit it. I'm like, oh my goodness, what is still, we have the moon and the sun, right? And so there's much more that could be said of this. But when you just look at a man and a woman coming together to hopefully, if everything goes right, to create and raise up a family, that's what it's all about. That's what this entire thing is all about. So anyway, share your insights. I'm sure you have some as well.
I just wanted to give you real props on your your channel, because that's the standard that I see you holding up. Is you talk about the importance of your husband and his role that he plays, and every husband and father and the role that they play, along with the women who are so essential to everyone and all of us. Like, there is no one without the other, and when we get out of balance with too many wives, it just doesn't work. It's out of balance, and you want to talk about planetary orbits and things like that. It is perfect balance, and and that balance of masculine, feminine, those complementary roles. Just good job. Really appreciate your channel.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I couldn't agree with you more. So thank you for the call. And it looks like, even though we have one more call. So this is our last call, and then we will be doing this again. So I guess, Mason, you're our last call for the night. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Michelle, it's Mason Webb. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. By the way, huge fan.
Thank you.
We're not supposed to idolize people, but you're making it really hard for me. So.
Thank you. Okay. Head check. Make sure my head's staying not too big. Thank you, Mason.
Hey, just calling about Ether 4, verse 6. It's talking about the sealed portion of the blade. And in there, basically, Moroni is saying, "For the Lord said unto me, they shall not go forth unto the Gentiles until the day they shall repent of their iniquity and become clean before the Lord." Now, in my opinion, nothing's more iniquitous than a polygamy, because it destroys the eternal union. It's a corruption of it. What are your thoughts about that? Because I think we're really being held back as a people because we still are holding on to the iniquitous and abominable teaching of man that is polygamy, in my opinion.
So my first thought is, shoot, I left that scripture out of my last episode where I covered this exact topic. So thank you for bringing another scripture to my attention, and darn you for not bringing it to me in time to include it in my episode. I wish I had it. So I could not agree with you more. And that scripture is going onto my list of ones that will just come I just want them to come automatically to me when I need them. And for some reason, I left that one out. I think you are exactly right. I think that the whole, like going back to that very first call where God is in charge and God is unfolding this, and nothing can stop the work of God from progressing. And I think that this is what it's about. All of these clues are here. We're to the third and fourth generation, and all of this is being exploded right now. I think it's profound.
Yep.
And part of what I think is so exciting about this scripture that you just brought to me, as well as the others that teach the same thing, is what it's showing is the opportunity it's showing us, right? Because if we are willing to come out of those iniquities, if we're no longer carrying around abomination in our back pocket, right? Then what can the Lord do with us? I think it's incredibly exciting. What do you think?
Absolutely. And here's what's crazy. What I love about what you're doing is not only are you defending Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith, but you're defending God our Father. To make a claim that he commanded something like 132 does, that he commanded his sons to break and tear apart the hearts of his daughters. What a more blasphemous claim out there, and a direct contradiction to Jacob 2 and two other parts in the Book of Mormon where it talks about Noah, King Noah, and one of the other kings.
Replikish. Yep, Replikish.
Yeah, Replikish. 3 different witnesses that polygamy is not from God.
I could not agree
more. We're literally blaspheming our God, our Father.
Yes. Yes.
And what an iniquity we've got to repent of, and with a broken heart, a contrite spirit, and quit trying to pretend that all is well in Zion, because it's not.
Yes, you're singing my song. Yes, I do. That's why I really do feel led so often to end these episodes with the invitation to repent, because that, as I said in a few callers ago, that was my repentance, was repenting for thinking that about God, for believing that was who God was, right? I felt like I was aware of how blasphemous I had been in that belief. And boy, it's better on this side of it, isn't it? Isn't it better on this side, having this understanding? So,
oh yeah, I feel so sorrowful that I ever tried to defend such an abominable practice.
I know, I agree.
And I'm guilty of that. So
yes, well, thank you, Mason, and I look forward to continuing to read your comments and hear from you. I appreciate it. And it looks,
you're incredible. Keep up the incredible work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we have an amazing parting gift, EJS. Thank you again for that super chat. Oh, guys, sorry. This has been a really good night for me. I'm really thankful that we've gotten to have this time together and have this engagement. And I look forward to continuing to do this. So thank you, all of those who have been following this podcast, for those who have been sharing this podcast, for those who have donated to the podcast. Thank you for those who sent in your chats and your questions tonight. I do hope that people will continue to be engaged in the comments, talking to one another. I love to see that happening, that there is so much engagement and the people are so willing to accept these ideas and excited to have truth. So thank you so much for joining us, and I will see you next time. And apparently I have to close this, so I'll say that again.